Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel Sedyanka. And if you're a new one, welcome to Sedyanka. This is a place where I talk about Bulgarian culture and history, and I also wear the attire so that you can get a sense of that culture. So I have a topic for you today. I thought about talking about the Thracians. A little backup that has nothing to do with that topic, or possibly doesn't. I had a pretty busy week and a lot of frustrating events and a lot of hustle and bustle that I had to handle. And finally, when I got a day that was free for myself, it was almost like I had no idea where to begin, how to do self-care, how to take care of myself, which one of my many things that I could potentially do. But knowing about self-care, I decided to take it easy. It's a good, usually kind of like a first step. And I love to crochet. I love to make big, long-term crochet projects. But today was one of those great times, good enough for a short-term project without much of calculation that just doesn't require much thought and much strength, and that was just satisfying enough. So I started crocheting this little thing. We'll see what comes out of it. I'll follow up in future videos. I'll show you my end result, but it's supposed to be so far a warmer, a little arm warmer, and I did make it ribbed in English, I should say. So it is made from 100% wool from camel, and I had purchased it a long time ago, but I had just never come up with the strength or the idea of what to do with it. So we'll see. That's going to be a creative project I'll be working on in the upcoming days, I guess. We'll see. I made myself some coffee and good. I enjoy it. So the topic for today is the emergence of the Thracians. Who were the Thracians? What is Thracian? Have you heard of Thracians? What do you know about Thrace? And I'll tell you right off from the beginning that probably chances are, my guess would be that you might have seen movies about the Thracians that relate the Thracians to Greece. Except that in my episodes, everything's about Bulgaria, so why is that? So we're going to challenge some knowledge here. We're going to challenge some information, and I'll let you make your own decisions and your own conclusions about this. But yeah, I do have a lot of questions about our resources of knowledge and what our movies are showing and demonstrating and so forth. And I'll share some of them towards the end. So the emergence of the Thracians. So in the Bulgarian language, we call the Thracians Traki. And by the way, the dress that I put on today is called Trakiska Nusia, which is a Thracian dress. And I plan to cover more in the future in my videos about Bulgarian clothing attire and its meaning and background. But just for this video here today, I'll give you this much of information, just the clue that our clothes tell what region we're coming from. So if you see somebody in clothes that resemble this, they're kind of like with flowers, there is a white shirt that's embroidered typically, or in this case it has some sewing material kind of figures added to it. And then it has sukman, the second, like an apron dress that goes over the white dress. It can be red, it can be in different colors. And then there is typically an apron that's made in, that has lots of flowers, embroidery of flowers. It may be embroidered in the cross-stitch type of embroidery, or other types of embroideries, like this one, it's a little fluffy. So all of this actually goes back to the Thracians. So what's it about the emergence of the Thracians? So the Thracians are first mentioned for the first time in Homer's Iliad. Did you guys know that? So understand that's the 13th century. And so the Thracian king Rez was described in the Iliad as a powerful ruler who had golden chariot and marvelous weapons. And Homer himself says that those were suitable for the gods, or the gods. So around 5,000 years ago, Thracian tribes inhabited a large territory that was spreading from the Carpathian Mountains in the north to the Greek islands and Malaysia in the south. The core of this large territory was indeed today's territory of Bulgaria. And I will include a few resources. You may look it up. YouTube has a specific video that's called The Cradle of Civilization about Bulgaria. It's just interesting. They're not exaggerating. There are lots of resources. There's been much research recently that has emerged and relates to this. So, towards the end of the Bronze Age, that's around 1500 BC, the Thracians represented a separate group of people, one of a kind, and they were made from many and numerous tribes. They were the descendants of the civilization that I talked about in episode 2. That's the oldest European civilization on the Balkan. It started from the Balkan Peninsula, and it had emerged during and or prior, we really don't know, the Stone Copper Age, and so now we are moving into the Bronze Age in this at this time. So those people were farmers, potters, weavers, jewelry makers, agriculturalists. They were also builders and architects and so forth. They had been overpowered by the Indo-European warrior invaders who had rushed in from the northern steppes of the Black Sea. And so, the Thracians were descendants of the ancient Balkan civilization, and they created one common culture together with the Indo-Europeans. So this culture was quite advanced and knowledgeable because their ancestors had already possessed so many skills from the previous era. These people were able to produce bronze, so all of their agricultural tools as well as weapons were made durable like that. The Thracian tribes were ruled by chief leaders who had the status and leadership of kingsmanship. And so they ruled together with the so-called para-dynasties that were formed by co-leaders who basically had the full-blood relationship as relatives to the king. The name Thracians, or Thraci, actually means brave and courageous. And it derives its meaning from a lost word in the Thracian language. Herodotus in 5 BC informs us that the Thracians consisted of such a huge population that they were actually second to the Indians at the time. So, I get excited when I talk about this, as always. So in the zenith, or at the peak of their prosperity, the Thracians consisted of about 1,500,000 people altogether. Ancient historians are acquainted with over 80 names of the Thracian tribes, and so some of those are the Bessi or the Odrisi, the Geti, Tribali, and so forth. If you know those names in English, I'd be happy to hear what they translate into. But that's the best I could do with, translating names is always such a hard hassle, especially things like this, names of a culture that's so little talked about in nowadays. So what did they look like? Ancient writers have described the Thracians as beautiful, stout, handsome, shapely, strong people. So in their looks, they were strong and tall. They were very attractive, is what they say. Interesting enough, they say that their skin color was light, and their hair was blonde and or reddish. And I thought that's interesting, just because I've encountered many people who have made the assumption that Bulgarians necessarily should have brown hair and darker skin or olive skin, but in reality, we come in many different shapes and forms and colors. You may actually find one of the greatest diversity in Bulgaria, diversity of people, when it comes down to tone, skin, color, hair, and so forth. So yeah, that's what they looked like. Their men and women used to adorn their bodies with different embroideries or symbols, and there is much written to nowadays about like the clothes, how the embroideries that we wear actually resembles what they used to cover their bodies with, whether that was tattoos in the time or actually clothes. And their warriors used to wear ponytails. So I would love to see an epic movie that looks like that. I cannot focus on this and talk, by the way. It's been a challenge. I don't know if you can do it. So the Thracians, actually, here is a fun fact. They did not have they didn't have capitals in their countries. And by the way, I should say that their tribes were so advanced, and the way people lived, they basically were kind of like countries. Separate tribes were sort of like countries, different kind of like organized groups, but they didn't have capitals. Their villages instead had fortresses, and the reason for that was because their leader was the leader of and the owner of the entire land. So every now and then he would go from one place to another and reside there for a long term, kind of like visiting his land. And he was basically accompanied by his army of civilians who were aristocrats and just rich people. And by rich at the time, understand, they were knowledgeable, they were skilled. I think that nowadays the meaning of rich has lost its meaning. We are kind of missing the point nowadays. Everybody has access to education, or most people do. Most people have access to information. But back then, that wasn't the case. So, in the case of war, all men were mobilized at a certain age. The king, who was ruler of all, he also had the role of a priest. And it's interesting because when it comes to spirituality and religion, a lot of artifacts have been discovered that give us clues as to what their beliefs must have been. But there's one that's located in Buzovgrad, near Kazanluk. It's on the territory of Bulgaria. It's a megalithic door that is the door of a sanctuary. So what historians and scientists have deduced from that is that it tells us that the religious life of the Thracians included all sorts of rites that were performed in nature and at various places, various locations, and all of them originally were located in the mountains. I will be happy to share more about this in other videos in the future. There is a Thracian treasure. We call the treasure at Vulchitran, or Vulchitranското съкровище. Again, I'll add a link because language translation and transliteration can be so hard to recognize, but you may be able to find some more information about this once you see that link below. So this is the oldest or the earliest Thracian treasure, and it's been discovered in the lands of Bulgarian territory, nowadays Bulgaria. It dates from the 14th or 13th, around 14th, 13th century BC. And it consists of 13 golden vessels, some of which are just very unique and like unseen, unheard of, unseen in other places. There is a story that I actually wanted to share with you, and I'm going to set this aside so I can read it. It's a story about King Seftus the second. He was a Thracian king at the time, and Xenophon in the 4th century BC, in the Anabasis, that's the source, describes what a Thracian feast during the rule of this Tsar or king looked like. So I'm going to retrieve my little resource here and share with you if you don't mind. I just found this so mesmerizing. It helps me kind of like enter this epic story more authentically, more fully. So that's the reason why I decided to share this. It's just a short excerpt. So it goes. The most noble of the Thracians that were present there, the generals at the Hellenes, entered the feast. And so the feast began by sitting down in a circle. 3-legged tables were brought for all, and the people were around 20 in number. The tables were heaped with pieces of meat and large loaves of bread. Then Seftus, the Thracian king, first did the following. Taking the loaves set before him, he broke them into pieces and gave them to whomever he wished. They distributed horns of wine, and everyone took those. While the feast was going on, a Thracian entered on a white horse, and taking a full horn, he said, I drink to you, Sefte, and I give you this horse with which, whomsoever you shall pursue, you will capture if so you wish. And should you retreat, then you shall not be afraid of the enemy. Then people entered with horns, giving signals, whistlers, and trumpeters. Seftus alone, raising himself, uttered a battle cry and sprang slightly as if warding off a blow. It's cute. I think it's cute. I think it's a very cute, epic story. Just a little excerpt. So I think at this point of this video, it's time for a little bit of a reflection. I wonder what you all think about this. Are you shocked to hear, that the Thracians originated from the Bulgarian territory? And what are your thoughts? Why are our movies not including Bulgaria when they talk about Thracians and, thousands of years ago? What would it be like to include an epic movie and actually dress them in their proper attire, proper clothes, and call the things what they are? So I'm sitting here today and taking it easy, and I'm going to plunge into a reverie. And I'm not a historian, but I read a lot of historical resources like this. If you're new to this and you're learning, then I'm learning along with you. And if you know more, then I'm happy to learn from you or share, in whatever shape and form. So feel free to write in the comment section. As I've mentioned before, I am not a professional with computer technology. I'm not a professional video editor, hence my movies are just raw and kind of like real, sitting here. And yep, I'm still keeping my Christmas decoration up there. We in Bulgaria tend to keep our decoration for the entire winter, even though we don't have much snow where we live here, and that's completely okay. It's still the season, it's still the spirit, and to me it adds a little bit of coziness and cuteness and authenticity. So I will close with this, and I thank you for your attention, for listening. If you are not interested in this information and you don't want to participate, that's completely understandable. Of course, everybody is welcome, and not everybody has to share the same interest. But if you do wish to see more of this, please feel free to subscribe to this channel and offer topics that you would want to hear from, to hear about. So my accent and my English gets as raw as it does, and it just doesn't change. Some things don't change, and that is just as fascinating as how history and artifacts such as those that we talk about can remain preserved for thousands of years. So thank you so much, and I hope that you have a good rest of the day and week.